She thought she'd cleaned everything up. She threw that bag into the river like it was trash and drove off without looking back. And for a few seconds, she probably believed she'd gotten away with it. She didn't know I was on that back porch. She didn't know I was already moving before the water even settled. She didn't know that the thing she tried to bury was going to be the exact thing that buried her.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I want to be honest with you about something. The day I found out what kind of woman Desiree truly was, I wasn't in any shape to be anybody's hero. I was 61 years old, grieving, and I had basically stopped caring about most of what happened outside my front door. My son, Marcus, had been gone for 7 months. My husband passed 4 years before that. The house I was sitting in was too big and too quiet, and I had made a kind of peace with that. I live on the eastern edge of a lake community in rural Georgia. Not fancy, but clean. Old hardwood trees. A dock I don't use anymore. A back porch where I used to sit with Marcus when he was little, and we'd watch the light change on the water. After he died, I still sat out there most evenings. Not for the view, just because I didn't know what else to do with myself. It was a Thursday. Late afternoon, maybe around 5. I had a cup of tea going cold beside me, and I was watching a redbird in the birch tree near the water's edge. That's when I heard the car. Fast. Too fast for that road. The gravel lane that leads down to the public boat access cuts right along the side of my property, and when someone drives it wrong, you can hear it. I looked up and saw a white Hyundai moving at a speed that made no sense for that hour. She wasn't lost. She knew exactly where she was going. It was Desiree. I recognized her car before I recognized her. She and Marcus had been married for 3 years. She drove that same white Hyundai the whole time, and she drove it the way she did everything. Like the rules were other people's problem. She hit the brakes about 20 yards from the boat ramp and left the engine running. She got out of the car in a way I can only describe as frantic, but not sloppy. She looked like someone who had rehearsed being panicked. She went straight to the trunk, yanked it open, and pulled out a large duffel bag. Dark gray, canvas sides. Heavy by the way she pulled it. I knew that bag. I had packed Marcus's gear in it when he coached youth football. It had been in my garage for years. I had given it to Desiree when she asked me for storage bags after the funeral. I remembered thinking it was a strange thing to ask about at a funeral, but grief makes people practical sometimes. I gave it to her without a second thought. She was dragging it toward the water, and I could see her struggling with the weight. Her arms were shaking. She looked over her shoulder once, twice, scanning the road. She didn't look toward the house. She made it to the bank, swung the bag twice to get momentum, and then she threw it. The sound hit me before anything else did. A hard splash, then silence. She stood there for maybe 3 seconds, watching it sink. Then she walked back to the car, got in, and drove out the way she came. Tires popping gravel, engine fading, gone. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember crossing the yard. My legs just carried me toward the water, and by the time my mind caught up with my body, I was already at the bank pulling off my shoes. The bag had sunk, but the water out here is shallow close to the bank, 8, maybe 9 feet out. I waded in up to my chest. The cold hit me so hard it took my breath. I felt around with my foot, found it, got a grip on the strap, and started pulling. It was dead weight, soaked canvas full of water. I pulled anyway. I got it to the shallows and dragged it up onto the bank. And that's when I heard it. Faint, muffled. The kind of sound that your brain doesn't want to classify correctly because if it does, you have to deal with what it means. I don't remember crying. I think I went cold in a different way than the water. I unzipped the bag. Inside, wrapped in a soaked yellow blanket, was a baby. Newborn. Dark-skinned, small as a loaf of bread, and barely moving. The umbilical cord was tied with a strip of cloth, not clamped, not cut clean, just tied. Like someone who did it alone in a room without any help. I pressed my hand to the baby's chest. There was a heartbeat. Weak, but there. I pulled her out of that bag and pressed her against my body, wrapped my arms around her as tight as I could, and I ran. I don't know what I said on the 911 call. I remember the dispatcher's voice, steady and clear, telling me to dry the baby, to wrap her, to keep her warm. I swept everything off my kitchen table. I ran for towels. My hands would not stop shaking. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. It felt like 11 years. There were two of them, a tall black man with gray at his temples named Wendell, and a young Latina woman who moved like she'd done this 1,000 times. She took the baby from me, laid her on the stretcher, and said to her partner, "Severe hypothermia, possible fluid in the lungs. We go now." Wendell looked at me. "You're coming." It wasn't a question. In the ambulance, the young paramedic asked me where I'd found the baby. I told her, in the water, in a bag. She looked at her partner and then back at me, with this expression I've thought about many times since, a look that was equal parts disbelief and deep sadness. "Did you see who threw her in?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "my daughter-in-law." At the hospital, they took the baby into an emergency room, and I was left in a waiting area that smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee. A nurse with close-cropped natural hair came and sat across from me. Her badge said, "Nurse Camille." She asked me to tell her everything. I told her. When I finished, she wrote something down, and then she looked at me with the same kind of directness I try to use myself. "The police are going to want to talk to you," she said. "This is a criminal case. What you just described is attempted murder." That word, murder, sat in the air between us like a stone. Desiree, my son's wife, the woman who held my hand at Marcus's funeral and cried until her mascara ran down her neck. A woman who had tried to kill a baby. I couldn't make the pieces fit, not yet. 2 hours later, a young doctor came out to update me. He said the baby was in the neonatal ICU with severe hypothermia and some fluid in her lungs. He said the next 48 hours were critical. He said they would do everything they could. I asked if she would live. He paused. "We're fighting for her," he said. That's the best I was going to get. The detective who came to interview me was named Adriana Reeves. She was in her mid-40s, brown skin, natural locks pulled back, and she had a stillness about her that reminded me of a woman who had heard every lie twice already. She sat across from me in a small conference room and studied me the same way she probably studied every witness, like she was looking for the crack. She took me through the whole story. I gave her everything: the car, the time, the bag, the way Desiree looked over her shoulder, the way she didn't hesitate before she threw it. Reeves wrote without interruption. When I was done, she set her pen down. "What was your relationship with Desiree like?" I was honest. "We were polite. We were not close. I thought she was cold. Marcus loved her, so I tried." "Did you blame her for your son's death?" Marcus had died in a car accident 7 months earlier. Rain, a curve on Route 14. He went into a tree and that was it. Desiree walked away with bruises. I had always found that strange, but grief makes you look for things to be angry about, and I was aware of that. "I had questions about the accident," I said carefully. "I couldn't prove anything. I didn't accuse her." Reeves looked at me a moment longer than necessary. "Mrs. Beaumont, I need you to understand something. I'm not accusing you of anything. But here's where we are. Desiree Bellamy has vanished. Her apartment is empty. Her phone is off. No bank activity since yesterday. And you are the only person who says they saw her today." I heard what she wasn't saying. She thought I might have made it up, that I was a grieving, unstable older woman who had found a baby somewhere and invented a story to punish the woman I blamed for my son's death. I felt the anger rise in my chest, and then I let it go. Getting emotional with that woman would not help me or the baby in the next room. "I saw what I saw," I said, "and that child is alive. You can start there." Reeves stood, handed me her card, and told me to come to the station in the morning for a formal statement. "Don't contact Desiree if she reaches out to you." She left. Camille came back about an hour later with a clean change of clothes from the hospital supply room and a cup of tea that was slightly better than the waiting room coffee. She told me I should go home. I told her I wasn't leaving. She pulled up a chair and sat with me. Around 2 a.m, my pastor, Reverend Holt, appeared in the hallway. Someone from church must have called him. He was a quiet man, not one to force conversation when there was nothing useful to say, and he just sat with me in the plastic chairs while the clock moved. After a while, he said softly, "You did right by that child." "I hope so," I said. That was the whole conversation. It was enough. By morning, my back ached from the chair and my eyes burned from the sleepless night, but I stayed. Camille brought me coffee and half a breakfast sandwich and sat with me while I ate it. At 9:30, a doctor I hadn't seen before came to find me. An older woman, maybe 65, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Osei and asked if I was the woman who had brought the baby in. "We need your signature for some additional testing," she said. "You're not the next of kin, but you're the closest person we have right now. The social worker is on her way, but we'd like to move quickly." I signed, whatever they needed. That afternoon, Detective Reeves came back. This time, she had a man with her. Older, a suit, reading glasses. He introduced himself as a forensic genetics specialist. They sat across from me. Reeves put a folder on the table. "We ran the baby's DNA against the sample we took from you this morning during your medical exam." She paused. "Mrs. Beaumont, that baby is your granddaughter." The room went very still. I heard the words. My brain processed them one at a time. "Marcus has been gone 7 months," I said. "Nobody was pregnant." "Based on the timeline," Reeves said carefully, "Desiree was approximately 1 month pregnant at the time of your son's death, which means she knew." She knew. She had carried Marcus's child through 7 months of pregnancy, hidden the bump, given birth alone, and then driven to my lake to throw the baby in. And the whole time she was crying at the funeral, the whole time she was accepting condolences, the whole time she was a widow. "Why?" I said. It was the only word I had. Reeves looked at me steadily. "We're still building the picture, but there's something else you need to know, and I need you to stay calm when I tell you." I put my hands in my lap and looked at her. "We've reopened the investigation into Marcus's accident. There were irregularities in the original inspection of his car that were missed. When we re-examined the vehicle records, we found evidence that the brake system may have been tampered with." The air left the room. "Someone damaged the brakes," she said. "Desiree," I said. It wasn't a question. "She's our primary suspect. We don't have enough to charge her on that yet. We need to find her first." "Her motive," I said, and I could hear my own voice from a distance, very flat, very controlled. "Marcus changed his will, toward the end." Reeves nodded. 2 weeks before the accident, he updated the will so that his assets would go to any future children, not to Desiree. We believe he had found out she was pregnant and didn't trust her. My son knew. He saw it coming and tried to protect his child, and it cost him everything. "She killed him," I said, "and then she tried to kill the baby because the baby would have inherited." "We believe so." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the parking lot was perfectly ordinary. Cars, sunshine, people moving through their days. "How do I get her home?" I said. "My granddaughter." "What do I need to do?" The social worker's name was Jonelle. She was young, maybe 26, with neat braids and a professional smile that was working very hard to mask the fact that she was tired. She sat across from me with a clipboard and asked me the kinds of questions that told me exactly what kind of fight I was about to have. "Do you live alone?" "Yes." "Do you have a stable income?" "My late husband's pension and my own savings." "Any criminal history?" "No." "Any mental health treatment in the last 5 years?" "I had a brief course of antidepressants after Marcus died. 3 months." My doctor and I agreed it was appropriate and temporary. She wrote that down. "Once the child is discharged from the NICU, she told me. She would go into temporary state guardianship and be placed with a certified foster family. Given that I was 61, currently part of an active criminal investigation, and not a certified foster parent, I would not be eligible to take the baby directly. I would, however, be eligible to visit twice a week, under supervision. I looked at this young woman and I thought very carefully before I spoke. "That baby is my granddaughter," I said. "My son died protecting her. I would like to know what I need to do to bring her home." Jonelle softened just slightly. She explained the process: background check, psychological evaluation, medical clearance, home inspection, reference letters, a mandatory childcare course of 40 hours. How long? 6 to 8 weeks if everything moves smoothly. 6 to 8 weeks in someone else's house for a newborn who had already nearly died. "Tell me where to start," I said. 6 weeks of paperwork is its own kind of endurance test. I was at the hospital every morning by 7 and at various county offices by the afternoon. The background check came back clean, which I could have told them. The medical exam I passed. The psychological evaluation took 3 sessions with a woman named Dr. Ellison, who asked me questions like whether I was trying to replace Marcus with the baby and whether I had ever harmed myself in grief. I answered all of them honestly. I told her that Marcus was irreplaceable, and I wasn't confused about that. I told her the baby was her own person, not a substitute for anyone. I told her what I had seen at that lake and why I would walk back into that water 100 times over. I don't know exactly what she wrote in her report, but she must have written something useful. The home inspection was humbling. 2 inspectors went through every room. They measured things. They checked smoke detectors. They asked about fire escape plans and window locks. I spent close to $2,000 making the changes they asked for. The spare bedroom, which had been a junk room for years, became a nursery. I painted it a warm cream color. I bought a crib and a changing table, and a mobile that played soft notes. On the day I was setting up the crib, I found something in the closet behind some old boxes, a leather journal, dark brown, Marcus's name on the inside cover. I didn't know he kept one. I sat down on the floor of that half-finished nursery and I read every page. The early entries were ordinary: work, friends, a trip he took to see a college roommate. And then, about a year in, Desiree appeared. "She's different from anyone I've met," he wrote. "She doesn't reveal herself easily. I think that's what draws me to her. There's something she's always holding back, and I keep thinking if I'm patient enough, she'll let me in." Later entries showed the cracks, little things that bothered him. She never talked about her family. She sidestepped questions about her childhood. He had caught her going through his financial paperwork once, and she'd brushed it off as curiosity. He had filed it away without acting on it because he loved her. And then, about 2 months before he died, a longer entry. "She's pregnant." I found the test in the bathroom. When I brought it up, she shut down completely. She told me she doesn't want to keep it. She said a baby would ruin everything she'd planned for her life. I don't understand how she can say that. We made this child together. This is our family. I'm going to fight for it. The next entry, a week later. I've spoken to an attorney. I'm updating my will. If she terminates the pregnancy against my wishes, that's her legal right. But if she carries this baby to term and walks away, full custody goes to me. And if anything happens to me first, everything goes to the child. Desiree does not get a penny if there's a living heir. I don't think she's trustworthy with money. I've watched her for 3 years. I know who she is. I just didn't want to see it. The last entry was dated the day before he died. She came home angry today. She said, "I would regret involving lawyers." She said, "I didn't know who I was dealing with." I don't know what she meant by that, but I'm going to call Mom tomorrow. I need her to know everything just in case. I need her to know there's a baby. He never called. I sat on the floor of that nursery for a long time holding that journal. I was crying by the end, but quietly, the way you cry when you've already done most of your grieving, and this is just one more piece of the same enormous loss. My son had seen it coming. He had done everything he could think to do. It wasn't enough. The next morning, I took the journal to Detective Reeves. She read it standing up, turning pages slowly, her jaw tight. When she was done, she looked at me with something that might have been the closest she gets to sorrow. "This establishes premeditation clearly," she said. "When we find her, this is part of what ends her. Do you have anything on the mechanic yet?" She nodded. "A man named Devin Pryor, local. We found transfers from Desiree's account to his in the week before the accident. When we brought him in, he held out for about an hour before he broke. She paid him to cut the brake line, gave him $1,700 and promised more. He's been charged as an accessory." $1,700. That was the price she'd put on my son's life. And the insurance? She collected $214,000 4 months ago. Within 3 weeks, it was moved to an offshore account. We're working with federal authorities to trace it. I looked at Reeves. "You still can't find her." "No," she said, "but she's going to make a mistake." They always do. The call came on a Tuesday evening, 3 days after I had submitted my final paperwork for the custody hearing. I was at home warming a bottle because by then I had supervised visits with the baby twice a week at the hospital, and Camille had given me so many instructions that I was practically practicing at home with an empty bottle just to get the muscle memory right. The number was blocked. Something made me answer it. Silence first. Then a long, slow breath. Gloria. Her voice was the same, smooth, controlled, like she'd never thrown a baby into a river. I did not make a sound. I set the bottle down very carefully, switched her to speaker, and picked up my other phone. "Desiree," I said. "I'm not calling to fight," she said. "I'm calling because this has gone far enough. I want my daughter." "Your daughter," I said, "is in a hospital NICU recovering from what you did to her." I made a mistake. I was postpartum. I was in crisis. I was alone. Any jury is going to understand that once they hear my side. Is that right? Gloria, I am her mother. Legally, I have more rights than you do, regardless of what you've told the police. And the story I can tell about you, the obsessive grieving mother who manufactured a story to take my child because she couldn't cope with losing her son, that's a compelling story. I've thought it through. I kept my voice completely flat. "What do you want?" "I want my daughter, and I want the money from Marcus's estate. The insurance was rightfully mine. The trust he set up for the baby, that money belongs to her, which means it's mine to manage. I want it transferred, and I want you to drop everything with the police. And if I don't, then I disappear again and you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. And eventually I come back with a lawyer who's better than anything you can afford, and I get my daughter back through the courts. You think a 61-year-old woman with no certification and a history of antidepressants is going to win a custody fight against the biological mother?" She paused. "I've had 7 months to plan this, Gloria. Don't be foolish." I let the silence sit for a moment. "Where do you want to meet?" I said. She told me. An abandoned fishing cabin 2 miles down the lake road. One I knew because Marcus and I used to drive past it when he was little, and he used to ask who lived there. 11 o'clock the following night. No police, just me and the baby. "Fine," I said. The line went dead. I called Detective Reeves before I'd even set the phone down. Reeves's team set up in my living room the next afternoon. She had 4 officers, 2 in civilian clothes for the perimeter, 2 positioned near the cabin. She explained the plan calmly and clearly, the way she did everything, like she had already seen how it ended and was just moving through the steps to get there. I would go in wearing a wire. I would keep Desiree talking. I would not bring the baby, but I would tell Desiree the baby was in the car. The team would hold until she said enough, then they would move. Camille had taken the baby home to her apartment. She had Matthew's diaper bag, his formula, his favorite yellow blanket. She texted me a photo at 7 that evening. He was asleep on Camille's couch, looking like nothing in the world could touch him. I held that image in my mind all night. At 10:45, I drove out in my own car. Reeves was crouched in the back, out of sight. The radio in her earpiece crackled with the team checking in from their positions. Perimeter clear, back entrance covered, all systems working. The cabin looked exactly like I remembered. Weathered gray boards, a sagging porch, 2 windows with broken sills, no light inside. I parked. Reeves slipped out silently and disappeared into the trees. I walked to the cabin door. It opened before I reached it. Desiree looked thinner than the last time I'd seen her. Her hair was shorter, cut close to her head in a style I'd never seen on her before. She was dressed in dark clothes, and she was wearing the look of someone who had convinced herself she had already won. "You came alone," she said. "I did." "Where's the baby?" "In the car. I need to hear you say it first. I need to understand why." She studied me for a moment, then she stepped back and let me in. The inside of the cabin smelled like mildew and old wood. One of those wind-up camping lanterns sat on the floor, giving off a pale yellow light. There were no chairs. We both stood. "You want to understand," she said, and there was something like contempt in her voice. "Or you want to feel better about what you're going to do next." "Marcus was my son," I said. "I deserve the truth." She tilted her head slightly, and then she told me. She had married Marcus because he was reliable and well-employed, and she had been tired of scraping by. She'd planned to stay 3 to 5 years, manufacture a reason to end it, and walk away with half. When she found out she was pregnant, it disrupted the plan. She didn't want a baby. She especially didn't want a baby that would tie her to a man she was planning to leave. When Marcus updated his will and she realized the money was going to skip her entirely, she had to accelerate things. Devin Pryor was someone she'd met through a mutual connection. She'd paid him to handle the brakes. She hadn't expected the crash to be that clean, but it was. She'd carried the pregnancy because she couldn't risk anyone finding out she'd hidden it. She'd given birth alone in a rented room 2 counties over. She'd planned to leave the baby somewhere anonymous, a hospital drop box, a fire station. But then she'd thought about the lake, about how it would just be over, how it would be permanent. "You drove to my lake," I said. "I knew you'd be there," she said. "I thought if you heard anything, you'd think it was an animal. I didn't count on you seeing my car." She said it so flatly, like she was explaining why she'd chosen one grocery store over another. "The money from the insurance," I said. "Already in a form she can't touch," she said. "But the baby's trust is still accessible if you cooperate. I'm offering you a clean deal, Gloria. You walk away from all of this with the knowledge that you saved a baby once. I take my daughter and I disappear. No one gets hurt." "She's not going anywhere with you," I said. "Then this gets ugly for both of us." She reached into her jacket pocket. I pressed the button. Once, twice, 3 times. The door came off the hinges. Desiree turned. She had the gun halfway raised. There were 4 officers in the room before she could finish the motion, and Reeves behind them, and Desiree was on the floor and disarmed before I fully understood that it was over. She screamed. She called me names. She made threats about lawyers and appeals and all the things she was going to do when she got out. Reeves put her in cuffs and read her rights to her in a steady voice, and none of what Desiree said made any difference to anything. I walked outside. The night air was cold and clean. I stood at the edge of the porch and breathed it in. From inside, I heard Desiree still talking, still working the angle, still trying to find the play. She was a woman who had never learned how to stop running that particular engine, even when the race was already finished. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo Camille had sent. The baby, asleep on the couch, peaceful and small and entirely unaware of what kind of world she had landed in. "You're going to be all right," I told her in my head and maybe out loud. I believe she heard me. Desiree's trial moved faster than I expected. The recording from the cabin was clean. Her confession was complete. Devin Pryor took a plea and testified against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. Richard's journal was entered as evidence. The insurance fraud, the offshore transfers, the burner phones, the rented cabin where she'd given birth alone, all of it came out in front of 12 people who listened to every word and then came back with a verdict in under 4 hours. Guilty on all charges: first-degree murder, attempted murder of the baby, conspiracy, fraud. The judge sentenced her to life without the possibility of parole. I was in the courtroom when they read it. I didn't cry. I just sat there and let it settle. Marcus would have been 34 years old that year. He would have been the one raising this baby. He would have been a good father, patient and funny and steady. I had always known that about him. He didn't get to be that, but I got to be here, and that had to count. 3 weeks after the verdict, I had my final custody hearing. The same judge who had given me temporary guardianship reviewed the reports. She looked at the social worker evaluations, the medical records, the monthly home visit notes. She looked at me over her glasses. "Mrs. Beaumont," she said, "this court is granting you full and permanent legal guardianship of this child, effective immediately. Furthermore, you are hereby authorized to proceed with the adoption if you choose to do so." Jonelle was sitting in the row behind me. She put her hand briefly on my shoulder. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to adopt her." The gavel came down, and just like that, she was mine. I named her Imani. It means faith in Swahili. Marcus had told me once that if he ever had a daughter, he wanted her to have a name that meant something. I went through a list for 3 days before that one found me. It found me because that's what she is, the faith that something good can survive what should have destroyed it. She is 4 months old now. She has Marcus's forehead and a lower lip that pokes out when she's working on something she can't figure out yet. She makes sounds in the morning that are not quite words and not quite music, somewhere in between, and I have learned to wake up just before her, so I'm ready. Camille still comes by twice a week. She has become a kind of auntie, which I think she and Imani both need. Reverend Holt blessed the house again last month and sat at my kitchen table and ate 3 pieces of sweet potato pie and said very little, which is exactly what I wanted from him. Jonelle came by for a routine visit in February and spent 45 minutes playing with Imani on the living room floor and almost forgot to fill out her paperwork. I didn't remind her until she stood up to leave. The money that Desiree had tried to hide, most of it is still tied up in federal proceedings. But Marcus had other assets, a small investment account I didn't know about, that I'm managing on Imani's behalf. Her future is going to be looked after. Her father made sure of that, even when he didn't know exactly what he was protecting. There are days when the house is quiet in the early evening after Imani's gone to sleep, and I sit in the same chair I sat in when I used to watch the water, and I feel Marcus in the room, not in a spooky way, just in the way of presence, the way a person takes up space even after they're gone. I think about what he wrote in that last journal entry. "I'm going to call Mom tomorrow. I need her to know everything." He never got the chance. So I found out the hard way. I found out in the worst way possible, and I almost lost her before I knew she existed, but I got her out. I keep coming back to that. Whatever else is true about this whole story, I got her out. My knees ached, my lungs burned, the water was colder than it had any business being in June, and I got her out. Imani Beaumont, 4 months old, named for Faith. Sleeping safe in the room where her father used to sleep, under a mobile that plays soft notes, in a house that finally, after a long time, has something to be loud about again. I'm not going to tell you this has been easy. 61 is not 29. My back has opinions about the 4 a.m. feedings. My doctor says I need to watch my blood pressure. My church ladies show up unannounced with casseroles and advice, some of which I use and some of which I smile about and put in the trash once they leave. But Imani laughs now. She started about 3 weeks ago. A big, bright, sudden laugh that catches her by surprise every time, and she looks around like she's trying to find out where that sound came from. And I laugh with her every single time because that sound is worth everything I've paid for it. Marcus, I think you'd be so proud of her. I know I am. Some people call me brave. I don't argue with them, but I don't agree either. Brave is when you're afraid and you do it anyway. That evening at the lake, I wasn't brave. I was a grandmother who looked out and saw something moving under the water, and every bone in my body already knew. The lake knew first. The water gave her back. And the rest of it, the fights, the hearings, the paperwork, the cabin at midnight, all of it was just me catching up to what was already supposed to happen. She's here. She's mine. And nothing is going to change that. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.